Well, it's the round of 16 at the World Blitz Team Championships 2024. We have Bilguun Sumiya from Hunuer, a team from Mongolia, against Magnus Carlsen from WR Chess. D4, D5, Bishop F4. Magnus plays the London system. The knight comes out to F6, and now the pawn is pushed forward. So Magnus is facing the Queen's Gambit declined kind of a setup. Now the bishops are placed opposite each other, but Magnus is like, if you want to take it. I'm okay with doubled pawns because it will increase my control over the e5 square. Bilguun waits for a bit and then decides against it and castles. Magnus now puts his pawn on c3. The pawn is pushed to c5. You can go directly bishop d3 over here, or you can go knight e5 as well. These are the possible moves, but Magnus brings his bishop back to g3 and queen c7 played, and Magnus quickly brings his knight, because if you would have been a bit careless with bishop d3, then knight d7 with the idea of e5 and black equalizes. So knight e5 very quickly is a good idea. Knight comes out to c6, challenging the central knight, and f4, strengthening this outpost right in the center of the board. Bilguun now has to decide how to continue, what to do about his c8 bishop, because that is a piece that requires some attention. He says, I'm going to play b6, then bishop b7. Magnus develops his bishop on this beautiful diagonal here. And now bishop b7 seems very normal here. Just putting the bishop here on this long diagonal, but Bilguun is taking his time. Maybe a5, bishop a6 is on his mind, but he goes bishop b7 and Magnus attacks the knight. A very good move is knight e4, because after takes, bishop takes, you have cd, ed, knight e5. Suddenly this is hanging, and if you make the mistake of taking here, then suddenly your g2 pawn is falling. So you have to take d, and after bishop e5, bishop b7, queen b7, you can't take on e5 because of queen g2 attacking the rook and queen e4 check. So these are all complex lines, but knight e4 is the best move. But instead he goes knight e8. The knight jumps back here to e8, and this is a passive move. And one such passive move is all that Magnus needs to take over the initiative. He comes with his queen to g4. The queen is there, the bishops are there, the knight is there here. f5 played, Magnus brings his queen to not g3 but h3, and this is important because he keeps his g pawn free here. Knight comes back to f6, maybe eyeing the g4 square, and Magnus takes it. Now g takes f6 should be tried to challenge the e5 square, but he very quickly takes with the rook. White has a very powerful move now, and of course Magnus finds it. g4, ripping apart this pawn on f5 to open up more lines against the black king. You can't take here because of queen takes h7. So now the threat is maybe to take and take on f5. These are the plans. Bilguun attacks the queen. Queen goes to g3. And maybe now the plan is g5, h4. He takes on e5. Pawn takes. And if you play rook g6 here, trying to attack here, there's g5 followed by h4, h5. So he goes fg. He takes here, Magnus takes back. e6 is a bit weak, but it's defended by the rook. But right now it's all about the quality of pieces. The bishop on b7 is not so great. The bishop on d3 is great. But the white king is in the center. Do you want to long castle here? What are the plans? The position still remains complex for sure, but white has a very pleasant position. Magnus goes h4. Such a nice move here. Just gaining some space, maybe trying for h5 to trap the rook here, which doesn't have any of these squares. So this rook on h6, which looks active, can get into real trouble. a6 played, trying to expand on the queen side and create some play, which is a logical way to go about things. But it will be interesting to see how Magnus creates his play, because black's idea is b5, b4, and just try and attack this pawn chain. Where is Magnus going to create his play? And that's the reason why the world number one is thinking here. He goes king e2. Wow, I love this move. He did not long castle. He keeps his king in the center, believing in its safety, maybe trying to break the rook to f1 or g1. For Bilguun, one possibility is knight e7 to knight f5. This is one plan. The other is b5, b4 that he can go for. So he's thinking here, he goes b5, and Magnus very quickly brings his rook to f1. The rooks are traded, rook takes, and now queen comes to e7 attacking this pawn. Magnus quickly brings the knight, b4 is played, but after knight to g5, trouble, he takes on c3, and Magnus can think about rook f7 here, but maybe taking back is not such a bad idea, because why do you want to complicate stuff with rook f7 for the time being? Or is Magnus... Oh my god, he plays it! Wow, what a move! cb2 is not working because this square is controlled by the bishop. And right now if the queen moves away, then I go rook g7, king g7, knight e6. Here, queen g7, and this leads to a very big attack here because of queen d6 check and bishop f5. So he goes here, gives up the queen, knight takes, king takes, and Magnus takes back the pawn. And this resulting position is clearly better for him. You can see how Magnus calmly brings his bishop back to c2. Knight goes to e7. And this game's accuracy level is simply off the charts from White's perspective. Magnus has made all the best moves. But there's still some technical work to be done because the position is winning. But you have to find a way to break through. And I think there are many ways. One is to try and get your queen from the other side here. That's one way. The other is to break with e4. But first Magnus brings his king here to d2. What is Magnus's idea here? Is he planning to use his king moving up? King f8? Oh my god, that would be simply unbelievable. He first goes bishop d1. Protects this pawn so that when bishop e8 comes, again, prophylaxis at the highest level, not allowing black to wriggle out. Queen g5 attacking the knight. Now you can see this pawn is defended, this pawn is defended. So even if he brings his knight out to f5, you don't have to worry. You can simply move your king forward. King f7 played. You can push your pawn to e4. Love it how Magnus is actually going to bring his king in here. Knight comes to f5 and bishop g4 attacking the knight. He goes back, king comes up, bishop d7. Lot to learn from Magnus even in the blitz game, how he is keeping control. And now with the knight and bishop on the queen side, he breaks in the center, takes, knight takes, and queen moves in this time, attacking the bishop. The queen is a monstrous piece and it gets even stronger when it starts to attack targets. The rook is terribly placed here on d8. Now bishop e6 could be a very interesting move because rook takes e6, d5 is hanging. But Magnus tries to keep it simple. Queen c8 takes the pawn on c4 and now knight b5 check. King moves up. King comes to e7. a4 hitting the knight. The knight really doesn't have any good squares to go to. Finally, the rook tries to come into the game, but at what cost? At what cost? He's already losing a piece here. Rook takes. He takes on b5 and now it's a queen versus rook. There are many different ways to win here. Brings his queen to attack the e6 pawn. King f5 gives a check and he forgets about the rook. Magnus Carlsen beats Bilguun Sumiya in the London system opening. But what an accurate game by the world number one. It was simply amazing. Maybe an absolutely accurate game there.